There's something men wish they could hear more than, "I love you." And here's the crazy part, most women have no idea what it is. This phrase isn't sexy, it's not poetic, and it doesn't sound like something you'd hear in a rom-com. But when a man hears it, it hits different. It unlocks something deep, primal even. It cuts through his emotional defenses, drops his guard, and makes him feel seen in a way almost nothing else can. But here's the truth: less than 1% of women say it. Not because they don't care, but because society never taught them that men need to hear this just as much as women need emotional safety. So if you're tired of surface-level advice like, just communicate better or be more confident, you're in the right place. Because in this video, we're going far deeper. I'm about to reveal the phrase that builds trust without trying, creates emotional intimacy without pressure, and can completely shift how a man sees you, whether you're just dating or 10 years into a relationship. If you've ever felt like you're giving your all but still not reaching his heart, this might be why. So don't blink, because what you're about to hear could be the simplest yet most transformative insight you'll ever learn about men. If you ask most people what men want, you'll hear things like respect, sex, admiration. And sure, those matter, but beneath all of that, beneath the pride, logic, and bravado, something far more vulnerable is happening inside the male mind. Men crave emotional significance. They want to feel like they matter beyond what they do, not just for their job, their status, or their ability to provide, but for who they are at their core. Here's the issue: most men have been taught from a young age that emotions make them weak, that showing fear, confusion, or softness makes them less of a man. So they build walls, they deflect, they stay silent. Over time, they stop expecting anyone to see them, let alone understand them. But beneath that silence is a deep unmet need to feel emotionally safe with a woman. Not just loved, but accepted in their most unguarded state. That's where this phrase becomes so powerful. It's not about boosting his ego. It's not manipulation. It's about meeting him in the one place he rarely invites anyone, his emotional blind spot. A major reason why so few women ever say this phrase is because of deeply rooted misconceptions about men. Many believe men are emotionally simple, or worse, emotionally unavailable by nature. But that's false. Men are just as emotional as women. They've just been taught to suppress it differently. So when a man shuts down, it's not always because he doesn't care. Often, he doesn't know if it's safe to be vulnerable. Another misconception is thinking that when men need space, it means they're losing interest. But many men process emotions internally. That's how they regain control and make sense of things. And here's a big one: the belief that men don't need emotional support because they're supposed to be the strong ones. But they do, maybe more than anyone realizes. Most men go through life carrying silent burdens, unspoken pressure, emotional isolation, and a few intentional words can feel like a lifeline. So what happens when men don't hear this phrase? They begin to shut down, not because they want to, but because silence feels safer than vulnerability. A man who doesn't feel seen or appreciated emotionally will retreat into performance. He'll overwork, overcompensate, or chase validation through success or control, all while starving for something much simpler: to be acknowledged without having to earn it. That emotional void creates a quiet kind of loneliness. It doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like distraction, distance, or even anger. And the heartbreaking part: these men often still show up for everyone else. They provide, protect, and stay reliable, yet no one checks in with them. They just keep going because that's what they were taught to do. But when someone finally says the words that break through that silence, everything changes. This phrase, "I'm proud of the man you are, even when no one's watching," carries a depth that reaches far beyond simple flattery. It speaks to a man's deepest emotional core, the place that rarely feels seen or understood. For most men, life is a constant performance. To provide, to protect, to succeed, to be strong. They live in a world that celebrates their achievements but rarely acknowledges their quiet integrity. The effort they put in when no one's there to notice. Society often tells men that their worth is measured by their output, their paycheck, their status, their control. As a result, many men equate love with performance. They believe they must earn approval through doing rather than simply of being. So when someone says, "I'm proud of the man you are," even when no one's watching, it hits differently. It cuts through all those unspoken expectations and says something completely opposite of, "You don't have to perform for me. You're enough, even in silence." These words offer what most men crave, but rarely receive: unconditional emotional respect. It's not about admiration for their success or praise for their achievements. It's about recognition for their inner character, the choices they make when no one's looking, the quiet resilience they carry without asking for credit. That kind of acknowledgement touches something ancient and human inside a man. It validates the part of him that often wonders if anyone truly notices the battles he fights alone, the stress he hides, the responsibilities he carries, the moments he doubts himself but keeps going anyway. When a woman recognizes that not the surface level strength, but the depth of his intention, it creates a kind of emotional safety that's incredibly rare. It tells him he doesn't have to wear armor around her. He can exhale, be real, be imperfect, and still feel respected. This phrase doesn't just make him feel good, it shifts his identity from being valued for doing to being valued for being. That shift is powerful because it quiets one of the loudest fears men secretly carry. If I stop achieving, will I still be enough? When he hears these words sincerely spoken, that fear loosens its grip. It allows him to reconnect with his emotional self, the one he's often been told to suppress. He becomes more open, more expressive, more trusting, not because he's been told to be, but because he finally feels safe enough to be. The beauty of this phrase lies in its simplicity. It doesn't rely on grand gestures or poetic language. It's honest, grounded, and real. And that's what makes it so effective. It recognizes that behind every man's drive to succeed or appear strong is a human longing to be seen, not just for what he accomplishes, but for who he is when no one's watching. When a woman sees and acknowledges that, she's not feeding his ego, she's feeding his soul. This phrase works so powerfully because it speaks directly to one of the deepest, most unacknowledged emotional needs that men carry: the desire to feel respected and valued, not for what they do, but for who they are. From a very young age, most men are conditioned to believe that their worth is tied to performance. They're told both directly and indirectly that love, approval, and acceptance must be earned through achievements, strength, or success. Whether it's in school, sports, relationships, or work, men are often rewarded when they perform well and silently judged when they don't. Over time, this creates an internal belief that they must constantly produce or prove themselves to deserve love. So when someone looks at them and says, "I'm proud of the man you are," even when no one's watching, it disrupts that pattern completely. It offers something they almost never hear: unconditional respect. It says, "You don't have to earn my admiration. I already see and value you." That single moment can pierce through years of emotional conditioning. It reassures him that his identity and value aren't dependent on how strong, successful, or useful he is. It tells him he can stop performing for a moment and still be worthy of love and respect. Psychologically, this phrase activates what's known as the core self-worth loop, the internal conversation that determines how we measure our own value. For many men, this loop is filled with self-criticism and pressure. Am I doing enough? Providing enough? Strong enough? When they hear genuine, unconditional affirmation, it interrupts that negative cycle. It begins to rewrite the narrative in their mind from, "I'm only valuable when I'm achieving," to, "I have value just by being me." That simple shift can have profound effects on a man's emotional health, confidence, and even the way he connects with others. But there's an even deeper layer to why this phrase works. It triggers what psychologists call the receptive vulnerability response. Men are often taught to guard their emotions, to stay in control, and to avoid showing weakness. It's a survival instinct, one that protects them from judgment or rejection. But when a woman expresses unconditional respect, it signals emotional safety. His nervous system relaxes, his defenses lower. For perhaps the first time in a long while, he feels safe enough to open up without fear of being misunderstood or judged. This response is not just emotional, it's physiological. His body literally shifts from a state of alertness to calm, from guarded to open. That's why moments like this can feel almost sacred. It's not about manipulation or flattery, it's about connection. He's not reacting to the words themselves as much as to what they represent. A rare, genuine acknowledgement of his humanity. When a man feels that, something transforms within him. He doesn't just feel appreciated, he feels seen. He doesn't just feel respected, he feels safe. That emotional safety becomes the foundation for trust, vulnerability, and deeper intimacy. He begins to communicate more openly, to express affection more freely, and to show up with more emotional availability. Not because he's being asked to, but because he genuinely wants to. In a world where most men feel pressure to always be strong, always be composed, and never let their guard down, hearing words like, "I'm proud of the man you are," even when no one's watching, is like a breath of oxygen. It reaches a place inside them that's been quietly longing for recognition, not for the mask they wear, but for the person they truly are beneath it. Ultimately, this phrase works because it offers what every human being needs, but what men are rarely given: unconditional acceptance. It acknowledges that their worth isn't something they have to chase, it's something they already have. And when that truth finally lands, it has the power to dissolve years of emotional armor and replace it with something far more real: peace, connection, and love that doesn't need to be earned. These stories show something profoundly human: the quiet power of being seen, not for what we do, but for who we are. Both women in these moments weren't trying to fix, persuade, or change their partners. They simply offered a truth that most men rarely hear. I see the goodness in you, even when no one else does. That recognition reached past the surface and touched something deeper, the part of a man that often feels invisible under the weight of responsibility and expectation. In the first story, the woman noticed her partner's distance and stress. Instead of reacting with frustration, she responded with compassion. She didn't demand answers or accuse him of shutting down. She gave him emotional safety, the permission to be human. When she said, "Fipes, I'm proud of the man you are," even when no one's watching, it was like a key turning in a locked door. It told him, "You don't need to prove anything right now. I already see your worth." That moment of unconditional respect allowed his guard to drop. His silence and tears weren't weakness, they were relief. For the first time in what was probably weeks, he didn't have to hold it all together. And when he woke up the next morning and finally opened up, it wasn't because he was pressured. It was because he felt safe enough to be vulnerable. In the second story, the woman's timing was ordinary. After a simple act of kindness, that's what makes it powerful. She noticed something small but meaningful: her boyfriend's integrity when no one else was paying attention. Most men are used to being praised for big accomplishments, a promotion, a milestone, a success story. But being recognized for quiet character is something else entirely. When she said, "I really admire how you show up for people. I'm proud of the man you are," even when no one's watching, it landed somewhere deep. His reaction, freezing, then saying, "No one's ever said that to me before," reveals just how rare it is for men to hear such affirmation. That simple acknowledgement didn't just make him feel good in the moment. It changed the emotional tone of the relationship. From that day forward, he became more open, more affectionate, and more emotionally present. Why? Because feeling seen at one's core removes the need for emotional armor. When a man feels understood without being judged, he naturally wants to connect more deeply. Emotional openness doesn't come from demands or long conversations. It comes from safety, and safety is born when respect and acceptance replace pressure and expectation. Both examples illustrate a universal truth about emotional connection. People open up when they feel safe, not when they feel pushed. The phrase, "I'm proud of the man you are," even when no one's watching, provides that safety in its purest form. It tells him that his worth isn't dependent on what he achieves, how strong he appears, or how much he provides. It recognizes the unseen effort, the integrity, the quiet sacrifices, the decency that rarely gets acknowledgement. For many men, that kind of recognition is transformative because it touches a wound they've carried for years: the belief that love must be earned. These words gently challenge that belief and replace it with something liberating: the idea that they are already enough. Once that message lands, everything else begins to shift. Their tension softens. Their emotional world starts to open. Their affection deepens. At its core, what these women did wasn't complicated. They didn't use manipulation or strategy. They simply spoke truth from a place of empathy. They offered respect without conditions. And in doing so, they created a moment of emotional healing, the kind that can change the trajectory of a relationship. That's the real power of these words. They go beyond communication and enter the realm of transformation when a man feels seen at his core, when someone acknowledges the quiet goodness in him. He doesn't just respond emotionally. He evolves. He becomes more expressive, more present, more willing to love deeply. Because finally, he's no longer trying to earn love. He's free to experience it. Timing can transform the meaning of even the most beautiful words. The phrase "I'm proud of the man you are," even when no one's watching, only carries its full emotional power when it's spoken with sincerity, calm energy, and genuine timing. It's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it. If the moment feels forced or emotionally charged, the words lose their grounding. But when spoken during peace, not conflict, they can reach a man's heart in a way that few things can. That's why timing is everything. Using this phrase during an argument or when emotions are running high can make it sound manipulative or dismissive. In those heated moments, both people are in a defensive state. Their nervous systems are protecting them from feeling hurt or misunderstood. The emotional walls are up, and words, no matter how kind, can bounce right off. But when things are calm, when you're both present and relaxed, the same words become nourishment instead of noise. They're received as truth rather than strategy. The best time to use this phrase is after a man has quietly shown effort. Maybe he fixed something around the house without mentioning it, helped someone without expecting thanks, or simply carried himself with integrity when no one was watching. These small, unnoticed actions are often where his heart shines the brightest. Recognizing that effort, especially when no one else does, sends a powerful message as I see you. I notice the little things you do, even when you're not asking for praise. That acknowledgement lands deeply because it validates the part of him that works silently without applause. Equally important is the energy behind the words. Keep your tone soft, grounded, and sincere. Don't rush, don't over-explain. Let the silence after the phrase do its work. Sometimes the quiet that follows is the moment when the meaning sinks in. If he doesn't respond right away, that's not a sign of indifference. It's often a sign of impact. Many men aren't used to receiving such deep affirmation. They may need a moment to process it emotionally, especially if it touches something tender inside them. Silence, in that case, isn't distance, it's depth. Overusing the phrase, however, can dilute its magic. When words like this are repeated too often, they start to feel like routine rather than revelation. The power lies in their rarity, in the fact that they're reserved for genuine moments of truth. If it's used too casually or too frequently, it risks losing the emotional weight that makes it special. The key is authenticity. Say it only when you truly feel it. When your heart aligns with your words, he can sense it. Men are incredibly perceptive to emotional tone. They can feel the difference between genuine respect and rehearsed reassurance. Authenticity always lands deeper than perfection. You don't need to say the phrase flawlessly. You don't need to make it sound poetic or dramatic. What matters most is that it comes from a real place, from seeing him clearly, not idealizing him, but recognizing his effort, his integrity, and his quiet strength. When spoken with that kind of honesty, your words go straight to the heart. Think of it like planting a seed. You're not trying to change him or get something in return. You're simply acknowledging what already exists within him. That seed of respect grows over time. It builds trust. It deepens emotional intimacy. It reminds him that he doesn't have to perform to be valued. He doesn't have to constantly earn his place in your heart. He's seen and appreciated simply for being himself. And that's where the magic truly happens. When a man feels genuinely respected and accepted, he naturally becomes more open, loving, and emotionally available. He doesn't have to be convinced to share himself. He wants to. But it all begins with timing, tone, and truth. The right words, spoken at the right moment, with genuine intention, can do what no amount of pressure or persuasion ever could. They can make someone feel safe enough to be fully themselves. So when you say it, mean it. Say it softly. Say it when it matters most. Let your sincerity do the talking, and then let the silence hold the rest. Because in that quiet space, something invisible yet powerful takes place. Respect turns into connection, and connection turns into love that doesn't need to be earned. At the heart of every strong, quiet man lies a question he rarely says out loud. Am I only valuable when I'm useful? It's a question born from years of conditioning, from a world that rewards men for what they provide, what they fix, and what they achieve, but rarely for who they are. Many men grow up believing that their worth is tied to their productivity, their strength, and their ability to carry responsibility without complaint. The pressure to perform becomes so ingrained that even in love, they often feel they must keep earning their place through action, not emotion. That's why the phrase, "I'm proud of the man you are, even when no one's watching," holds such profound power. It's more than a compliment, it's an emotional correction. It answers the question that quietly haunts so many men by saying, "You're valuable not because of what you do, but because of who you are." It acknowledges his integrity, his quiet effort, his unseen sacrifices, the moments when he chooses to do the right thing, even when there's no reward. Those words affirm his character, not just his contribution. And for a man, that distinction can mean everything. It tells him that respect isn't something he has to chase or earn. It's already his. That kind of validation cuts deeper than praise for success or achievement. It reaches the part of him that wonders if anyone notices his silent strength, the effort he puts in when no one is clapping, the emotional weight he carries without complaint, the goodness he shows when no one's there to witness it. When a man feels that kind of recognition, something inside him shifts, his guard softens, the tension in his body eases. He no longer feels like he has to prove himself to deserve love. Instead, he can rest in it. That's the essence of emotional safety, the space where love isn't earned through performance but received through presence. In that state, he becomes more open, more affectionate, and more emotionally available. Not because he's been told to, but because peace naturally replaces pressure. This kind of connection doesn't come from intensity or constant reassurance. It comes from quiet authenticity. The instruction to find one quiet, genuine moment to say the phrase isn't about technique, it's about presence. Timing matters because for words like these to land, they must feel organic, not strategic. Maybe it's after he's done something thoughtful without expecting credit. Maybe it's when you're sitting together in silence and you simply feel appreciation for who he is. When you say it gently, with no agenda, it reaches him in a way few things ever do. And the most important part, let it land. Don't fill the silence. Don't explain it. Don't follow it up with reassurance or analysis. The power of this phrase lies in what it awakens within him, not in how he responds. Some men might go quiet, others might tear up, and some might simply smile and say nothing. But underneath that stillness, a shift happens, a kind of emotional uncoiling that says, I can breathe here, I'm safe here, say. That's why the challenge isn't just about saying the phrase. It's about feeling it when you do. It's about showing respect in its purest form, not the kind that's conditional on performance, but the kind that flows from seeing someone's essence. Respect like that builds something even stronger than love itself. It builds trust. It builds a stability. It builds the foundation where love can thrive without fear of rejection or inadequacy. When a man feels respected at his core, his natural response is expansion. He becomes more grounded, more emotionally available, and more loving, not from obligation, but from inner peace. He starts showing up more fully, not because he's trying to earn validation, but because he feels inspired to give it. It's in that state that men truly open, not through pressure or persuasion, but through the quiet realization that they are enough. That's what this challenge invites: one moment of truth. One sincere expression that speaks directly to the language men rarely hear, the language of unconditional respect. It's not grand or dramatic, but it's powerful in its simplicity. You're not trying to change him, you're showing him that he doesn't have to change to be seen. And that's the essence of the final line. Men aren't hard to love. They're just rarely loved in the language that reaches them. Most of the time, they're not waiting for more affection or attention. They're waiting to be understood in the way they understand love, through respect, trust, and acknowledgement. When that happens, everything changes. The walls come down, the distance fades, and what's left is something real, love rooted not in performance, but in peace.